go get snacks.
Oh, no, you gotta move that thing.
Wait. Am I on it?
No, down.
Right there.
Hey.
Well, I want to thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of
Oh,
course.
thanks, Fritz.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're going to talk about implementing and administering student-employee evaluations. My name is Cami Smith. I use she, her pronouns, and I work in talent development and assessment here in the Lory Student Center.
And I'm Stephanie Tomasini. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the HR manager of 7 departments in the Lory Student Center.
And sorry, Esther, will you also introduce yourself just so people know you?
Hi, I'm Esther Kemp. I am the HR operations coordinator is my title. And I work with Stephanie in the HR office.
Great.
So this is a short session. So we'll go through a few things and then we want to open it up for questions. If there are no questions, then I have some additional content that I'm happy to share about, pertaining specifically to the how, general tips, that kind of thing, so.
Great, so quick show of hands, who does some type of check-in or student eval already? Okay, couple hands, great. So for people who didn't know, the LSC is a part of the Division of Student Affairs. And as such, we aim to engage students through a proactive, data-informed, asset-based, and collaborative approach to student success by focusing on the following areas: well-being, sense of belonging and purpose, and career development. As you can imagine, that career development one is the one we're kind of focusing on today. So the goal is to introduce the students we employ to the concept of a performance evaluation so it's not as nerve-wracking when they encounter it in the future. We want to show students that evaluations can serve as an important tool to highlight their strengths and constructively identify areas where they could improve. They can be a time to discuss an employee's contributions towards the achievement of departmental goals, clarify job expectations, ask for feedback, make suggestions, and even reward an employee for exceeding expectations. Bottom line, a performance eval shows students that we are personally invested in their self-improvement. So if you look at your form, this is the student evaluation we've put together that is based strongly on the one that the Career Center put out a couple of years ago. So the first thing that you would do is select 3 or more competencies that you feel relate to your job or the job that the students are doing. Once you select 3, you have the employee self-rate on those selected ones and complete the self-reflection questions at the end.
I'd just like to also say that it doesn't have to be just 3. We're just asking for a minimum of 3. So you could choose 5, you could choose all 10 if you maybe only have one employee that you have to do this for. But it's totally up to you. Jill?
We ask the students to choose their own, is that?
Yeah.
I think that, yes, that's fine. I think this is very open to interpretation. You don't have to use this form. You can use a different form. If you already have a form, please don't recreate the wheel. If it's working for you, do whatever works for you.
Yeah, we definitely don't want people to feel like they have to change what they're doing if they're already doing something. There are a lot of areas that don't have any type of check-in or evaluation process, and so we're just trying to help them initiate and get one started. After the employee self-rates, then you as a supervisor would rate them on the same competencies that they rated themselves. And then you will meet with the employee to discuss the differences in those ratings, how they could improve to get to that higher rating, and discuss those answers to the self-reflection questions. Most importantly, turn in a signed electronic copy annually to LSC payroll. Again, an electronic copy. Where to find the form? We handed one out, so you have it, but it is online. So if you go to the LSC homepage and go to the Home tab, if you then go to the LSC Employee Resources tab, it'll take you to this page. And if you scroll down just a little bit, the student evaluation form is there, and it is a fillable form. So you can just download that and type right into it.
Or you can print it and write it.
and then scan it at the end to turn in the electronic copy.
We're happy to help with any of that.
I want to say I really like this approach because I've always said that in student evaluations of any kind are a business conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, I hope that, like, the best practice is that this is not the only conversation you're having with your employees, student or otherwise, that you're checking in with them, you know, at least once or twice a year other than this. But also, it should be an ongoing conversation. You should be recognizing their achievements and acknowledging their challenges on a regular basis.
So that's the form. It lists all the competencies on there for you. That's all the prepared material we have for you. So we'd love to open it up for questions that you might have about implementing these, or advice you have from your own check-ins that you do. We would love to hear it, because when we share information, that's when we all get better. Yeah?
Well, I know that Gen Z, that particular generation, needs a little bit more feedback than like me and the boomer generation did. What kinds of things have you seen that were successful that people have done in the way of checking in feedback and with Generation Z?
Yeah, so I've managed lots of student employees up until like the October, and you have to meet them where they're at. They are very much cell phone people. So if you're willing to text them, that's how you're gonna get a response from them. Like, especially when it's, hey, make sure you check your email for that paperwork from Higher Right, because you have to respond to that. Like, they might not be checking their emails, so it might take that text from you to tell them to check their email to actually get them to do it.
That is true.
I would also say, when you get an employee's contact information, like, try all of them, and the one that they respond to, stick with that one, because now you know, and they know. Yeah, now they know, you know. Once they've initiated that line of contact, you can be like, this is always how we will communicate officially. Also, this, the evaluation process, it should be paid. This is something you should do either during an employee's time they're already scheduled to work, or you should set up a separate time outside their scheduled shift and have them clock in for this.
And don't meet in a private area. If you can go have coffee, that's great. If you can go outside, if it's nice, but don't meet in the work area so that other people, it should be a private conversation between you and the student, or a couple supervisors and the student. Are there other questions? I have some general tips. It should not be a one-sided conversation. You should be asking the student for their take on the whole thing. Like, you can ask them, what are they learning in this position? Good thing would be to say, what are you learning in your classes, or things that you're studying for your future career? How does that apply to this job? When students filled out the student quality of work life survey, the big thing that they said was that they didn't see how student employment was connected to their future career.
65%.
So that's a big purpose of this, is to show them, like, you know, every job has customer service. That's connected to every career for the rest of your life.
Yep.
In some way or another. Perhaps it's just internal customer service, but it's still customer service. And so that's the big draw of doing these, is that we're trying to benefit the students. And we want them to, our job is to prepare them to go out into the professional world. And we want them to leave here prepared to do that. And so this is another thing that we can do that will benefit them in the long run. I know it's one more thing on the supervisor's plate, but that's also part of our jobs, is to foster student success. So you could also ask them what they like about the position, what isn't working, ways to improve. You want them to have as much stake in doing their best job as you do. I mean, you have students to help you do your job, but this is also a benefit to them. So you want to point those things out as well.
Yeah, the goal is to help the students make the connection from their job duties to the skills that they're gaining by doing those job duties. I think a lot of times students kind of stop there. They're like, oh, I'm a cashier. Like, they don't think about the fact that like that repeatedly doing transactions is improving their personal accountability, or like that working on a register day after day is improving their digital proficiency. Like, we as educators and facilitators and employers need to help them bridge that gap and make those connections. And the performance eval is a time to do that. It's another chance to get that information in front of them and help them make that connection. And it's easy to assume that people are getting that information when they might not be. So it's our job to put it in front of them as much as possible.
I think during the evaluation, it's a good time to remind students what the mission of your unit is and have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
Because if people don't know what the mission is, you don't have one.
Also, I think it's important for you, when you hired that job, you posted a job description on Handshake. You should have that with you when you do the evaluation. And we're also working on developing some universal job descriptions. I mean, like, when I come to these things, like yesterday I was sitting in one of these and I was thinking all the things we still need to do and all the things that we don't have. But you should have a job description so that you can reference what their job is, what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, cite examples. Don't focus on personality, focus on, like, don't focus on their behavior. If you're talking about reliability, say, I'm sorry, don't focus on their personality, focus on the behavior. But if you're talking about reliability, the things that make them reliable, that they, that they don't ever call in sick unless they really are sick, that they show up before their shift starts, that they, that you can count on them to acknowledge people when they come in the office. So you want to be sure. Another thing I found that was very interesting says that if you have a criticism, don't sandwich. This is not a student affairs way, but this particular advice did come from another university, and it said do not sandwich criticism between two compliments, because it dilutes the action that's needed for the improvement. And so, like, a lot of people say to me, like, don't give me bad news, sandwich the meat between the two buns, and which, if you know me, I don't do that. But
I heartily agree with that, because whenever that's happened with me with a supervisor, it's like, oh, I know what's coming.
yeah. Well, you do this really well, but
In performance evaluations or check-ins I've done with students in the past, I've started the check-in with like, hey, here's some kudos. These are things that I think you do really well. And then I would finish the evaluation with, before you leave, like, here's some areas I think you can improve on, just so that they left the meeting with that at the top of their brain. Start with the feel-good stuff and then give them the meat afterwards, if you will. Yeah, B?
I also really like to provide my evaluation to the students ahead of time, like at least a few days in advance, because then if there is some potentially negative feedback or areas of improvement, they have some time to process the emotions attached to it, so that when it comes to the conversation, we can actually focus on what needs to happen rather than, and then we can process through some of the emotions if they're still there. But I think it removes the initial shock of like, oh, I've done something.
Right, I think that's really good advice. And I know for myself that my supervisor does that. And so it gives me a little bit of time to be like, oh, okay. And what, even if it's good, it gives you time, because I think for some people, there's trepidation around evaluations, like, and that's another reason you should check in regularly, is to help avoid some of that. Like, if that's the only time you meet with them, or give them feedback, then they don't know what's coming, because they haven't had a series of check-ins that they know how you feel about it. So say you do the evaluation. After the evaluation, you have an outstanding employee. Things you can do going forward. Obviously, that's a time you can set expectations and goals for the next cycle or the next evaluation period. But if you have a person that's outstanding, look for things that you can, responsibilities that you can give them that will boost their resume. Can they be part of a project? Can they be like a student member of some team?
Search committee.
Yeah. Yeah, we do have the ability to do that, which is a huge benefit for kids to have that experience before they leave here.
So 2 questions. One, backing up, what do you mean by universal job description?
Well, we're working on job descriptions, say for like, student admin and clerical, which is what a lot of our jobs in this building are.
Okay.
Or, retail, what's the other one? Retail
and dining.
student retail and dining is the
Okay.
other one we have a lot of. So we're working on universal job descriptions then that you can take when you're ready to post a job in Handshake, and you can say, you can add specific duties for, say, the bookstore. And John, Mark, and Martine can add specific duties for the kitchen. And then we have a starting place. Some people write excellent job descriptions, and some people put one job duty, 100% customer service. And sometimes you're in a hurry to hire a position, but that's not really that's a whole nother session of how to write a good job description. But, you're not doing anybody any favors by not having specific job duties.
So I
So,
don't remember my name.
okay, well, pop in if you.
When I did evaluations, my students rated themselves way lower, like a humility kind of kind of thing. I'm like, why did you do that?
Yeah.
Let's talk about how great you are. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you have advice around no, this is like truly rate yourself. Truly, like, where are you at? Like,
That could,
don't try to
yeah.
impress me. Like, I don't know.
Did you use this one?
I use the shorter version of that.
I was just wondering, because like my employee also did that, and I think when you read through these competencies, they seem big. They
Yeah.
seem like, wow, I do those things, or like, they don't think about what they do as a student employee as being important in like reading through this kind of stuff.
I think that's just human nature.
Yeah, I think so
I mean,
too.
like I said to
Should we
Esther
prep
the other
them?
day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I said
But
to
maybe
Esther the
you-
other day, like, I need to write my own annual reflection, and I'm like, I don't know. And Esther's like, you did a lot. I was like, I did? What did you
I was like, I could write it for you.
do? Jill.
I had the same thing happen, but it was predominantly with the female.
The female student rated
I
themselves
think
lower?
research shows us
Yeah.
that is.
And I had a few of the, couple of the students rated themselves really high.
Yeah.
Kind of like there was a conversation.
You're like, ooh, this is gonna,
Maybe even give humility. But I mean, that's what I saw, and one student in particular rated herself really low, and I was surprised. And
Yeah.
so I was wondering too about strategies to, I had a similar conversation, like, you know what you do here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
kind of thing, but-
could be a self-confidence issue as well with both sets of employees, maybe not realizing how well they are doing their job. And Jamie, to your point, I do think there are several times when we can reiterate this information and like relate their job duties to the career competencies. And we have a training on that later today, if you wanna stop on by.
I think that's the point of the whole conversation, is to give them a realistic picture, one way or the other. I mean, if they rate themselves low, and you're like, no, you're terrific, like, you do this, and you do this, and you do this. I think that's the whole purpose of doing this, is to help them realize what they're doing. I think it is human nature in general. I believe there are definitely people that rate themselves high all the time, but I think most of us are more humble about our own. Well, maybe we're both sides of the coin.
I am perfect. Did you hear that, Emily? I'm
And
perfect.
it's not based on like a pay raise or anything like that, like traditionally in my work history, like it's been that, so. They're not trying to prove themselves
Right.
better in that way, so, I don't know, it's just hard to like no, you do great work, like, let's reflect that here.
Right, and, you know, it can be based on a pay raise. I mean, if your department can afford it, and I think a lot of departments do, even though sometimes it seems like a nominal amount, it's still something, it's still an acknowledgement
Yep.
of, and if your department can afford that, you absolutely should do that. And that's on a case-by-case basis. But I think, you know, we definitely do that in our office. I know, like, business services in general does that. Every year, we sort of give somebody a bump. Now, the minimum wage bumps have sort of forced everybody to address the compression, and so you maybe won't give it at the same time. Maybe they got a big bump in January when the minimum wage increased. So then you don't maybe give, maybe you give 20 cents. I know lots of departments give 20 cents, and sometimes I'm like, they have to work 5 hours to get $1 more.
But it will hit their paycheck and they will notice it.
Yeah.
Like I've talked to employees who have gotten a 10-cent raise, and they know when they're working the same amount of hours every week, they notice that difference in that paycheck, and it does make them feel better. Like you are worth this. I know it's not a lot, but it's all I can do. And you're worth it.
And maybe you can give them a candy bar, or, you know, something.
Buy them lunch, take them to lunch. It doesn't if you don't have the resources to do something monetarily, there are ways to, you know, show appreciation to your staff when they are doing well.
And reach out to your supervisors, because I do think a lot of supervisors would support that. Like, I want to take my team to lunch. I mean, I know, like, in areas like dining services, it's harder because you have so many more student employees, but I think there are ways. So I think be creative, and certainly come see me. I'll brainstorm with you, and I'll help you figure something out.
Speaking of, here is our contact information. Research shows that if you don't do anything with this information, 24 to 48 hours, it's like you never came to this training at all. So I encourage you to set up an appointment with Stephanie or I to talk about it. Tell someone later today about this training or something that you hope to implement about student evaluations. Sorry, Stephanie.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, Fritz?
I'm gonna share that with my supervisor, because I don't see her here.
Well, we do have another session tomorrow,
Oh, maybe she'll be signing up for that one.
maybe.
I will recommend it to her if she's not.
And please do the assessment if you have the time.
Have further questions, concerns?
Compliments of our outfits.
No, stop it. Jill.
I did have a question from a couple students about how we're using these reviews, you know, and I had a response where, you know, this is our check-in, and you know, it's for you to see where you're, but they're wondering, like, if it's in an office somewhere, someone calls, and I told them, no, that shouldn't happen.
It's going to be in my office,
Yeah.
but we wouldn't divulge an employee evaluation
Yeah.
for a career staff or a student employee. And if they called me, I would refer them directly to the supervisor anyway. And I will verify dates of employment, that is it.
That's what I said, that's, you know, for dates of employment.
And also, like, I think it's important to point out in that situation, like, where you're going.
It
Yeah.
will be in a file somewhere.
It will be in a file, it will be in your file, and your supervisor can review it. And I think if you have also long-term employees, you should reference back to that previous evaluation if you have it. And use it as a starting point for, okay, well, last year we talked about that.
Maybe this year we do digital proficiency instead.
Yeah. So, but we're not, it would be confidential information other than to the supervisor in general.
So let's say you're a new supervisor with student employees, and want to kind of get a litmus test of where they're at. As a new supervisor, can they contact HR, you know, at least in the LSC, to get the information on the files for people who are working still in that department? so they can kind of see where they're at, what they're walking into.
I feel like that's more applicable with pro staff than student staff.
But certainly you could do that. I mean, you know, like technically, we've just started this, so if you call me last year, or if you call me next year, I'm gonna be like, well,
I don't have
might
anything.
one if they did it, because this year we're still sort of saying it's optional, but beginning next year, end of April, it will be required. So plan ahead also, like if you have 20 students, you can't start April 15th, and, I mean, you can, but you're gonna be miserable.
We're still working on your taxes.
True, April 16th. So, you know, you do have to plan ahead. It doesn't have to be a period of April 1st to April 30th. You could, you know, you could start in January. They're just due by the end of April. And the reason we did that is that technically, the university has always required that. We just haven't required it. So,
We're getting up to speed.
that's right.
Better late than never.
Other questions?
Oh, yeah, another one occurred to me, so, sorry. I forgot 'em.
That's why we're here.
So, when it comes to like evaluations, does the Career Center offer any, tips for how to do evaluations? So if like you have a student that maybe is nervous about it, they can, outside of the work environment, you know, go get a little bit of coaching on the side, so they're a
Absolutely.
little bit more psychologically prepared if they're really nervous about it.
Yep, the Career Center does offer one-on-one kind of coaching sessions, and that's definitely something you could recommend to a student who is maybe nervous about this performance evaluation. You could tell them like, it's really not as scary as you think, but they could definitely get some feedback from the Career Center
You
beforehand.
should always encourage your student employees to use the Career Center because they do have a lot of great resources for students. They have resume writing.
Yeah.
Which we had a student that should have used that, so. But, you know, they have cover letters and encourage them, I think, encourage them to start when they're, I mean, if you have somebody that starts you as a freshman, encourage them to start to get to know the Career Center. There's a lot of tremendous resources down there that a lot of students don't use.
And then when people come in for orientation and get the families, I recommend the Career Center a lot to them.
Oh, good for you.
We want to respect your time. We are officially done, so if you have somewhere else
But
you need
if
to
you
get to.
have questions, please reach out to us, come to my office. If you did not sign this, would you please